What's good, everybody? It's Robo back with another video, and today about my college football week 6 picks. There's no FCS matchups this week, so I'm going over every FBS game being played. And although it's lacking in ranked matchups, we still got some great matchups to look forward to this week. So before I get everything, let me go ahead and recap the week 5 results. Week 5 was by far my best week to date. I went 33-19 overall against the spread to push that season record a lot further in the positive. I did really well in the toss-up games as well, helping improve that record on the year. So now moving on to week 6, let's hope I can continue that success with another great week of picks. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started in order of kickoff time as usual. Texas State and Troy are the first matchup of the week Thursday night, with both teams coming off of tough losses. I was pretty surprised with how poor Texas State's run defense was last week, as Sam Houston ran all over them and found a way to limit Ismail Mahdi on the other end. Nonetheless, this is a perfect opportunity for the Bobcats to get back on track, as Troy once again looked horrendous last week, and all three quarterbacks who played entered Thursday's game as game time decisions. With an obvious performance gap between these teams and a much better outlook for Texas State, I think we see a big rebound game here with Texas State running away with this one on the road. I'm going to go with a 38-20 final score. Sam Houston State really showed out last week that their start of the season was not a fluke, taking down a really solid Texas State team as an underdog. There's a chance this could be a potential letdown spot with a short week and it being on the road, but UTEP is not the type of opponent this team should be struggling with right now. Sitting at 0-4, they've had a really rough time on the ground game on the offense, and that's not going to change this week against Sam Houston. Cade McConnell had a pretty solid day through the air against Colorado State, but again, just 17 points in that game. And even at home this week, I'm expecting a similar result. Give me Sam Houston by 2 touchdowns, 31-17. Friday starts off in the Conference USA with Jacksonville State at Kennesaw State. These teams have both looked awful this season, but are heading in opposite directions, with Jacksonville State coming off a blowout win over Southern Miss, and Kennesaw State dropping a home game to UT Martin. Based on that, the obvious lean will be to take Jacksonville State in a blowout, and that's definitely possible, but honestly, I can see this one ending up pretty similar to FIU and Louisiana Tech game last week, with FIU dropping a home game to an FCS team and then rebounding with a win the following week against another bad team. With that said, I would be shocked to see Kennesaw win this one outright after an 0-4 start, but I do think we see a better performance out of the Owls, and they can cover a spread well over 2 touchdowns. I'll go with a 31-21 final for Jacksonville State. Next on Friday is TCU and Houston. Houston hasn't scored a single point in their last 2 games against Cincinnati and Iowa State, with legit zero resemblance of a passing game in either matchup. And while TCU's defense has not been good this season, I honestly doubt we see much of a change in this game simply because of how bad it's been for the Cougars. I don't expect the 3rd consecutive shutout, but at this point, they've got to rely on their defense to put the offense in scoring situations because they can't do it themselves. Luckily for Houston, the defense hasn't been all that bad. Holding Iowa State just 20 points last week was a solid performance, and gives me a little bit of confidence they can avoid a major blowout here. I'm obviously going to take TCU, but 17 is a pretty big number considering I think Iowa State's just a better team than the Frogs. I'm going to go with a 30-14 final. Michigan State failed to cover last week hosting Ohio State, but were really a couple fumbles away from making that game a lot closer than it appeared. Nonetheless, they obviously were not at the same level as that Ohio State team, and Oregon has an argument for being just as strong of an opponent. MSU has looked pretty good on the road so far, though, and still has yet to play a clean football game besides Prairie View. I think Oregon pretty much controls this game from start to finish as they're on a roll right now, but Sparty has enough talent to find some points and get a few stops to keep it a 3-score game or so. I'm going to take them to sneak out a cover on the road, 38-17. Hajj Malik Williams looked absolutely incredible last week for UNLV and completely put the Matthew Sluka transfer into meaningless territory. Maybe Williams should have been starting all along, as they just absolutely dominated one of the better teams in the Mountain West in Fresno State. This week they'll get another tough opponent with Syracuse making the trip to Vegas, and we've seen some great play out of Kyle McCord in this Orange team at times this year. I think they've got more than enough offense to score points against this defense, but with the way UNLV looked last week and Syracuse not necessarily being a strong defense, I like the Rebels to keep pushing for that Group of 5 playoff spot with another win over a Power 4 opponent at home, 38-28. UCLA's coming off back-to-back covers as major underdogs against LSU and Oregon, and once again comes in as a huge dog on the road at Penn State. Penn State had a bit of a hiccup against Bowling Green, but besides that game have looked really great, especially defensively. So once again, it'll be a major uphill battle for the Bruins looking for their first Big Ten win in program history. Ethan Garbers is questionable and going to try to play in this one, but no matter what, I think UCLA is in for a rough day offensively. And considering they held LSU and Oregon to both 34, I wouldn't think Penn State's offense will do too much better than that. I'm going to take UCLA to cover, but Penn State to win big, 35-10. Missouri at Texas A&M is definitely the game of the week heading into it, and we still have the looming question of whether Connor Wegeman will return and start for A&M. But just as Drinkowitz said, the offense just looks a little bit different with Reed. A&M is probably better off sticking with him for the time being, and that's my expectation as of now. Missouri has really struggled the past few games with Boston College and Vanderbilt nearly pulling off upsets, and I think their ability to finish games being tested could pay off big time in a road game like this. A&M's coming off a solid win against Arkansas, but still don't look like the better team in this game, even with the recent play of the Tigers. I like Missouri to get the ball in Luther Burden's hands early and often and finish out yet another dogfight to stay undefeated, 28-23. Louisville hosts SMU this week in a tough game to try and bounce back with after the Notre Dame loss. This SMU team has been absolutely rolling since naming Kevin Jennings a starter, dropping 66 on TCU and 42 on Florida State. This Louisville defense is up there as one of the better ones the Mustangs have seen, but there's no sign of them slowing down much right now. Louisville honestly outplayed Notre Dame on the road last week, but the turnovers killed them. I think we get a great game between two potential ACC contenders here, and Louisville escapes this one by a field goal, 30-27. Wisconsin is back home taking on Purdue after they lost to USC last week. And honestly, Braden Locke didn't have a great game, but he made a few throws that I think could give this offense a bit more confidence moving forward. Purdue is obviously one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, but they battled last week for a while against Nebraska. And USC was definitely a game to get up for Wisconsin, and they still weren't able to keep that one close in the end. It wouldn't surprise me to see this offense continue to struggle to score a ton of points. And I do think Hudson Card in the run game has looked solid enough for Purdue to find the end zone more than once in this game. I've got Wisconsin winning this one by 10, 27-17. Northern Illinois took their second straight loss last week after falling to NC State by a touchdown, and will get a great chance to get back in the win column as they host 1-4 UMass, who still has not beaten a MAC opponent in 3 tries this year after falling in overtime to Miami, Ohio last week. It was honestly an incredibly even game considering how much better I viewed the Miami defense, and I think despite the loss, battling that close is a solid sign they can compete in this game as well. Northern Illinois has definitely looked better than Miami, Ohio so far, but I still haven't seen enough to say they're 3 scores better than this team considering how close last week's game was. But I do think Ethan Hampton and Ontario Brown will find a great rhythm and control this game by the end. So give me NIU by a 28-17 final score. Boston College missed Thomas Castellanos last week in a big way as they needed a late touchdown to survive at home against Western Kentucky. But it sounds like he'll be good to go for this week's road matchup with Virginia, who 2 weeks ago put a whooping on Coastal Carolina with nearly 400 yards on the ground. This Virginia team still seems pretty hit or miss to me. I wouldn't be shocked to see them in less of a rhythm coming off the bye week. And Boston College is clearly a different team with Castellanos running the show. Both these teams have tough games ahead, so it's an important game to come out on top of. I think the boost of having Castellanos back will help Boston College get the offense going again and come away with a tough win on the road, 31-28. Next up, we got 4-0 Pitt heading out to North Carolina. A much different story than we expected with UNC, really struggling without Max Johnson and blowing a 20-0 lead against Duke last week. And Pitt very surprisingly off to an undefeated start thanks to a breakout year from redshirt freshman quarterback Eli Holstein. After losing to Duke, I'd have to imagine the vibes around North Carolina right now are pretty low. And I think Pitt's shown against Cincinnati and West Virginia that they can slow down decent run games, a lot like North Carolina has with a superstar back in Omarion Hampton. He'll definitely get his, but as long as Pitt can keep a lid on his ceiling, the UNC defense just has not looked good enough outside of last week to show they can be the team to give Eli Holston a bunch of trouble. Give me Pitt on the road to win and cover, 38-27. NC State once again looked completely lifeless offensively last week against Northern Illinois at home, and just barely sneaked out a cover with a 7-point win. But lucky for them, their opponent is Wake Forest this week, who's coming off a loss to Louisiana in their own house. This is a battle of bottom feeders in the ACC right now, and there's a clear difference in issues with this team. NC State can't score, and Wake Forest can't stop anyone from scoring, so something has to give in this game. I could genuinely see it going either way, and typically would trust a team who's found an easier time scoring points. But I think we've seen some slight improvements out of true freshman CJ Bailey at quarterback, and I still believe the weapons on this team are good enough to find at least some offensive success. I'm going to stick with NC State again this week, 31-24. We've got our first military school battle of the year with Air Force hosting Navy this week. The Falcons sit at 1-3 after the loss to a bad Wyoming team last week, with their lone win coming in a struggle week 1 over Merrimack. The one thing about this Air Force team they may be able to hang their hat on is that the defense has been at least somewhat competitive, but they still couldn't even muster 20 points on Wyoming. I don't think that'll be much different with a better Navy team this week. The Falcons just replaced way too much this offseason, so even though military matchups typically are closer than usual, I just think there's too big of a gap in level of play for this one to be that close. Give me Navy in a lower scoring game, 24-10. Army continued their offensive dominance last week, completely rolling over Temple, and are still on the road this week, but up against another weaker opponent in Tulsa. This team got absolutely steamrolled by a great North Texas offense last week, giving up 600 yards in the process, which gives me almost zero confidence they'll be the team to find a way to stop the Army ground game. After a 400-yard day last week, I gotta stick with the Black Knights to keep that offense rolling. I don't think Tulsa stays in this game for too long. Give me Army 35-17. Tulane was one of the most impressive teams in the country last week, destroying South Florida 45-10. And this week, they're just 2 touchdown favorites on the road over UAB, who's coming off a blowout loss at home to Navy. Jacob Zeno was a guy I had a lot of faith in before the year started, and he's flashed the talent at times this year, but the Blazers are sitting at 1-3 with ugly losses to ULM and Navy now, and Zeno has just 6 touchdowns to 5 picks on the year. With the way these teams are looking coming into this matchup, even at home, I'm not giving UAB much of a shot unless they look drastically different. Tulane's dominating on both sides of the ball right now, and Darian Mensah is in full control. I like Tulane in this game big, 38-20. Western Michigan's at Ball State this week, with both teams sitting at 1-3 in the year, coming off losses, but in a little bit different fashion. Western played Marshall pretty tough, and Ball State just hit a brick wall against a super hot James Madison team, falling 63-7. Nonetheless, though, James Madison's clearly a far superior team compared to the Broncos of Western Michigan, and Ball State should feel much more comfortable in this game. They nearly took down Central Michigan 2 weeks ago. I do think from all I've watched this year, Western's got the advantage on both sides of the ball, but the gap is fairly close to what it was with Central 2 weeks ago. And at home, I think Ball State will show up and have a real chance to pull off an upset. I do think Western just has better talent across the board, though, and they'll sneak away with a win in this one, 30-24. Number 3, Ohio State's back home Saturday taking on Iowa, with the Hawkeyes getting 2 weeks to prep for this one after last week's bye week. That could bode well for their chances of competing, but mostly defensively, as this Iowa offense is still way too reliant on the run game. We'll have to count on their defense to put them in easy scoring situations. Iowa State arguably has the best defense in the country through 4 games, and there's no way you can trust Iowa to score more than 10 to 14 points or so in this one. I think Iowa will get their fair share of stops early, but at some point, once again, the amount of weapons this team has will outlast the Hawkeyes, and they'll just be able to score just enough. I'm going to go with the Buckeyes 31-10. Georgia-Alabama was one of the games of the year last week, with Carson Beck nearly leading the Dogs all the way back from a 28-0 deficit. But now they'll have to put the loss behind them and take on Auburn this week. And although I don't think this Georgia team is as scary as teams from the past right now, history tells us Georgia can absolutely dominate after a loss. On top of that, Auburn's coming off a near 500-yard day that resulted in just 21 points and another loss. Oklahoma's defense is definitely a great one, but Georgia should be an even tougher matchup for the Tigers, and I think we finally see this offense getting a rhythm against a really good Alabama team. I've got the Dogs getting back on track in a big way over Auburn, 45-13. Ole Miss fell victim to maybe the shock of the weekend, going down to Kentucky as 17-point favorites. I knew Kentucky's defense would give them a chance to compete in that game, but I really never expected them to pull it off completely. That performance from the Rebel offense is going to give South Carolina some confidence heading into this week, as they've got a solid defense of their own and had the bye week to prep for this one, which makes it a bit hard to tell what to expect, as Ole Miss could come out guns blazing and ready to roll after that loss. And at the same time, South Carolina could come out getting stops and working on the ground game. I think we see some early action from both teams, but eventually Jackson Dart settles in and delivers some big-time throws to seal the victory. I'm going to go with a 30-20 final score. Indiana continued their dominance covering spreads last week with a 14-point win over Maryland. They'll head out to Evanston this week and take on 2-2 Northwestern off a bye week. Northwestern's defense should have an early upper hand in this game with a 2 weeks of prep, but as I said all year, this Indiana team looks so good pretty much across the board. Even with a couple of picks last week, Curtis Rourke had a great day, and Indiana put up 42 points despite 4 turnovers. I think they've got enough talent and a strong enough defense themselves to outlast any strong start from the Wildcats. I don't think Northwestern has the offense to score enough to give them a real chance, so give me Indiana 31-14. UConn is on an absolute heater right now, and that should continue this week up against Temple at home. This Temple team really cannot stop anyone from scoring right now and just got shredded by the Army triple option. Offensively, though, I still think Temple found their guy in Evan Simon despite a subpar game last week against a stronger Army defense. I think the offensive issues more so boiled down to the fact they finished with negative rushing yards in the day. That most likely won't be the case this week, as although UConn is playing great, I don't think they're as good defensively as the Army has looked, and I think Temple will be able to get things moving again, at least in some way. I think UConn handles this game without too much of a sweat, but I just feel like 17 points is a little scary to take, even with Temple's issues. I'm going to go with a 34-21 final score. Virginia Tech lost an absolute heartbreaker last week, and maybe the finish of the year at Miami. Nobody was really giving them a shot, and they finally came alive as an offense and nearly pulled that game off. Regardless, though, I think the performance should give them a huge boost of confidence on the offensive end and maybe a chance to rewrite their season after a rough start. But they'll have to start it on the road at a sneaky Stanford team who took down Syracuse on the road and hung around with Clemson for around 3 quarters last weekend. I definitely see this game as a potential trap for Virginia Tech, being much less excited for this one after a heartbreak and a different level opponent. So I see Stanford giving another real test, but I do have faith in Drones to in this offense coming alive again and finishing off a nice win on the road, 30-24. App State is back in action this week after a free bye week with the Liberty game canceled due to the hurricane. I think that was a little helpful as they've really been struggling and could use a reset and not drop another game to a solid Liberty squad. They're on the road at Marshall here, who's coming off a 7-point win over Western Michigan. A little less impressive than I think they had hoped, but a win is a win regardless, and they should be confident heading into this week. Despite some poor play, I still believe App State quarterback Joey Aguilar is one of the better talents in their group of 5, and they've got a pretty solid rushing attack to support them. This game's going to come down to their defense finally getting it together and making crucial stops to let the offense work, and I think we finally see App State play the way they were supposed to this year going into it. Give me App State close, 28-27. Toledo hosts Miami, Ohio on Saturday, and a matchup preseason was looked at potentially as the 2 best teams in the MAC. Toledo's looked apart, but Miami, Ohio really struggled again last week before picking up their first win of the season at home in overtime over UMass. Toledo's coming off a loss, but had a really well-timed bye week last week to go over that loss and work on some things over this game. And from what we've seen from these teams, Miami's defense still looks fairly legit, but they've got some real offensive issues. And despite the loss again, I still thought Toledo played a fine game on the road, actually outgaining Western Kentucky in that game. I think Toledo comes back hungry to take control of the MAC early with a solid win at home over a team who definitely could still be in it later on. I'll go with a 28-17 final score. Staying in the MAC, we've got Bowling Green heading out to Akron, sitting on a 3-game losing streak to Penn State, A&M, and shockingly Old Dominion. I thought they look a lot better than they did last week, using those 2 tough losses to their advantage, but if there was ever a time for that to happen, I would have to figure it'd be right now, as even with it being on the road, this Akron team looks abysmal, dropping a conference game to Ohio by 20 points last week and getting outgained by 300 yards. I still believe this Bowling Green team can be a contender in the MAC, and it starts with an easy win coming in this week. Give me the Falcons on the road, 35-17. East Carolina finally finished the game strong last week, putting up 20 second-half points to take down UTSA at home for win number 3. This week they're back on the road, taking on Charlotte, who's also coming off a solid win, taking down Rice last week as road underdogs. They also use a strong second-half push to come from behind that game and come out on top, and although Rice has looked awful to start the year, any road win is big for this team season regardless. I think it'll give them some confidence heading into a tough game against a much-improved ECU team that finally got it together last week. And although I think it's clear the Pirates are a better team in this matchup, I don't think Charlotte's going to get ran out of the building here, so give me ECU by just a touchdown, 27-20. Nobody needs to win arguably more than Oklahoma State right now, coming off back-to-back Big 12 losses to Utah and Kansas State after abysmal starts. And last week, even the defense completely collapsed, giving up over 550 yards on the day to the Wildcat offense. They could not stop the run game whatsoever, giving up 300 on the day and almost 9 yards to carry in total. And although not as strong, West Virginia runs an offense with some similarities to Kansas State, with Garrett Green being a dual-threat quarterback and 2 solid running backs in Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson. This is going to be yet another tough test for the Cowboys, especially with the Mountaineers having 2 weeks to prepare for this one. I'm expecting another back-and-forth game, but I would be shocked if they didn't try and get Ollie Gordon involved more. I think the Cowboys finally head back in the right direction and hold off West Virginia enough for the win, 34-28. Rutgers at Nebraska looked like a potentially incredible game with a lot more relevance now than in the preseason, with Rutgers coming in 4-0 and Nebraska at 4-1. Both these teams picked up solid wins last week, with Rutgers surviving a late comeback from Washington at home, and Nebraska coming alive in the second half to blow out Purdue on the road. As most Rutgers games go, I fully expect this one to be a defensive game with a lot of rush attempts, but Dylan Raiola does throw a bit of a difference in this one with his ability to extend plays and make throws down the field. This will be another challenge, maybe even tougher defensively than Illinois was, and I do expect Rutgers to take this one down to the wire, but I've got Raiola and the Huskers giving the Knights their first loss of the year in a close one in Lincoln, 24-20. Alabama picked up maybe the biggest win in the college football season so far last week, holding off a huge comeback attempt from Georgia, and man, did they look dominant for a huge portion of that game. Ryan Williams has turned into an absolute superstar as a true freshman and helped this Alabama offense reach an entire new level. This is obviously letdown game territory, though, immediately going on the road against Vanderbilt, who has generally shown a pulse this season, taking out Virginia Tech and nearly upsetting Missouri last week in double overtime. Now, in between those games, they did lose a road game to Georgia State, so we'll have to see which Vanderbilt team shows up this week, but I think they'll be more than amped up for this opportunity, and Diego Pavia's rushing ability will help them extend some drives and score a few times. But I just don't think Alabama's offense will be stopped enough to give Vandy a real shot in this one. I've got Bama 42-21. Oregon State continued their ground game dominance 2 weeks ago in their blowout win over Purdue, and although their defense struggled to stop Purdue on the ground as well, they completely shut down the passing game, which helped lead them to the dominant win. Colorado State does not look nearly as good as some expected heading into the year, beating UTEP by just 10 and getting thumped by Colorado the game prior. They haven't had too many problems stopping the run to this point, but it also hasn't been a big strong suit of their defense either. I think Jam Griffin and Anthony Hankerson continue to control the game for the Beavers, leading to another win, but Colorado State should be getting Torrey Horton and Jack Howell back, which could make things a bit interesting for the Rams. Regardless, I'm going to take Oregon State by 2 scores, 31-17. Clemson heads to Tallahassee to take on Florida State this week, and some FSU fans may be more excited than usual this week as DJU's status for this game was announced as out and he could miss some extended time, leading to a real chance for Brock Glenn. It's no secret this season's been a nightmare for both DJ and his Seminole team, coming in 1-4 and with very little hope to come away with a win here against a surging Clemson team. With DJU officially out, we'll have to see what Brock can do for this offense and if he can turn the tides at all. But it's hard to have any faith in this team figuring anything out right now, especially up against a defense as strong as Clemson has. I think Klubnik and the Tigers continue to roll on to 4-1 with a big win on the road over just a beat-down Seminole group, 34-13. Ashton Genty has been arguably the best performer in the entire country through September, putting up over 800 yards and 13 touchdowns through 4 games on not even incredible workload. I think it's safe to say he's the best back in the country right now, and Utah State flat out does not have what it takes defensively to slow him down at all. This team gave up 45 to Temple and 38 to Utah without Cam Rising, so I'm expecting Boise State to put up 40+ in this game once again. The one thing for me is just the spread sitting all the way up at 27. It's very doable if the Boise defense dominates, but I could easily see a backdoor cover with some late offense from Utah State coming when the Broncos call off the dogs. This game isn't going to be close at all, but I do think Utah State finds enough offense throughout the night to sneak a cover. I'll go with a 45-20 final. Coastal Carolina and Old Dominion is a tough game to pick this week, with Coastal kind of being all over the place this year and Old Dominion looking really competitive against a tough schedule to start the year. Coastal got a much-needed week off last week after getting demolished by a subpar Virginia team, and that doesn't give me a lot of confidence in the Chants heading into this game. Old Dominion's coming off a pretty big win over Bowling Green, which I was not expecting at all, It's their first win of the season, and this could be a chance to really build on that one. But on the road, under the lights, I think Coastal's 2 weeks to prepare are going to come in handy for them to reset and really establish who they look like week 1, dropping 55 on Jacksonville State. They've got a couple tough games coming up and absolutely can't turn this game into a losing streak. Give me Coastal 31-23. South Alabama at Arkansas State is a bit of a weird line to me, with the Red Wolves coming off an ugly blowout loss to Iowa State before the bye, and South Alabama's offense looking pretty unstoppable up until LSU this past weekend. Even so, in that game, they still managed a decent day statistically. LSU just completely dominated them on the other end, going for almost 700 yards of offense. But from what we've seen out of both these teams, Arkansas State just looks a bit outmatched to me. They'll need a great game out of Jalen Raynor and a few key defensive stops to pull it off. And I've got a lot of trust in Gio Lopez right now for the Jags offense. But I think we see some points here, but South Alabama comes out on top, 37-30. James Madison yet again put on an absolute offensive clinic last week, taking down Ball State 63-7, building off of a monster win at North Carolina the week prior. This week they'll hit the road again, taking on Louisiana Monroe, who's looked quite a bit better than expected so far, with a couple wins over UAB and Troy, and a lone loss coming to Texas. And while this ULM team isn't too bad, I do think the record could be kind of inflating the spread a bit more than it should be towards the ULM side. Taking down Troy 13-9 despite being outgained just doesn't do it for me, and James Madison is on an absolute tear and has beaten simply better teams. Give me James Madison to win big once again, but a bit lower scoring than they have been. I'm going to go with 41-17. Louisiana heads to Southern Miss this week after their solid upset win at Wake Forest a week ago. I really considered picking that, but I just had too much faith in Wake being able to really hold them off. But that was a really solid win for this team, who now gets a chance to build on it with a Southern Miss team coming off an ugly blowout loss to Jacksonville State. We really have no clue who's starting at quarterback for Southern Miss right now. It could be any of Rodemaker, Crawford, and White. But no matter who it is, I think Louisiana has proven they're the far superior team in this game after last week's win, and a close game with a great Tulane team the week prior. I've got the Cajuns on the road big, 38-21. Tennessee hits the road at Arkansas this week, looking to keep it rolling, coming off the big win over Oklahoma 2 weeks ago, in which I thought they showed they were a legitimate playoff contender as they found an early offense against a really good Oklahoma defense. Arkansas is coming off a tough road loss at A&M, where Taylor Green just couldn't get anything going besides a couple big plays here and there, and the run game was completely shut down. The defense did a nice job against a below-average A&M offense, but this is a whole different beast this week, having to face the Vols. I don't think they'll be able to slow down Tennessee much at all here. I've got Nico making another statement with a big win on the road, 35-20. We've got a national championship rematch Saturday night with Michigan heading out to Washington, but a way different story this time with two completely different teams. Based on what we've seen so far, this should be a pretty strong defensive battle. Michigan missed Will Johnson and Josiah Stewart last week and nearly blew a 21-point lead to Minnesota, but they'll both be back for this one, which would be a big boost to both the pass rush and coverage. I don't think either team has the offensive capability of scoring more than 30 in this game against these defenses, and although Michigan's pass offense is still non-existent, two things travel on the road, and that's the run game and defense. I think Michigan has the upper hand in both and is just the better team in this matchup, so give me the Wolverines to survive a tight one with a bunch of field goals, 23-20. USC heads up to Minnesota Saturday night looking to pick up where they left off, dominating Wisconsin in the second half last week, finishing that game on a 28-0 run. I still think this USC team has a chance to sneak into the playoffs if they're able to take down one of Penn State and Notre Dame at home this season, but Minnesota could prove to be a legitimate test for the Trojans. Last week, they nearly made a big comeback to scare the Wolverines in Ann Arbor, but I will say the first half of that game really was not close at all, and Michigan just completely fell out of rhythm, and we're missing some big-time pieces defensively. As of now, I'm taking that game as more of a fluky second half, and I just think USC has the better offensive talent than Michigan does, and won't let that game happen again. Give me the Trojans, 34-21. Iowa State's offense has been up and down throughout the year, with some incredible performances combined with a couple rough ones. Just 21 on North Dakota and 20 to Houston, but then 52 on Arkansas State, and a road win over an elite Iowa defense. This week, they'll host Baylor, who fought back from a huge deficit last week against BYU, but fell just short in the end. With this game, it really depends on how the Cyclone offense looks, as if they're clicking, Baylor just doesn't seem to have what it takes to get consistent stops, and Iowa State could run away with this one. Baylor's likely going to struggle throughout this game offensively, so I think a couple early scores will put the Cyclones in a great spot. I've got them taking this one by 2 touchdowns, 31-17. San Jose State and Nevada face off Saturday with both teams coming off a bye week, and I definitely favor San Jose State in this game. Just based on what we've seen the last few weeks out of both these teams, I think the Spartans found a real stud in Emmett Brown, nearly taking down Washington State on the road, putting up 50+ in that game. He can make some ridiculous throws and extend plays with his legs, and is just a sophomore. Nevada's coming off a big win over Eastern Washington, but they also gave up 350 yards in that game, so I'd have to imagine we'll see some more offense out of both teams in this one. I just think from what we've seen from San Jose State's team, they look much better than Nevada. I'm going to take them to win and cover this one, 30-20. Florida is back this week after the bye, taking on a UCF team looking to bounce back from a tough blowout loss at home to Colorado. A game where the defense really got smacked around and turnovers just kept mounting up on them. I still think this UCF team's a very solid group, and that was just a really poor game from them. And then obviously they've got a shot here as they head to Florida, as they are actually favored in this one. Florida has had a rough year so far, but they looked so much better a couple weeks ago. It was just Mississippi State, but the Mertz and Lagway tandem threw just 2 incompletions on the day, and the offense was in full rhythm. I can see that boding well for them in this game, as they absolutely must win this one if they want to reach a bowl game this year. They start an unbelievable gauntlet next week, and chances are pretty slim right now, and basically 0 with a loss here. I think Florida comes out focused, knowing what's ahead, and stays in rhythm they built 2 weeks ago. I'll go with a 34-30 final. Georgia Tech is back from the bye week, taking on Duke this week, who still sits with an undefeated record at 5-0 after last week's come-from-behind win over North Carolina. This Duke offense clearly still has some problems and couldn't get anything going for an entire half, but credit to them for battling it out and getting into a rhythm to pick up a win. And I think the defense deserves a lot of credit as well. They haven't had a tough schedule by any means, but no more than 21 points allowed at this point. That probably changes, though, with Georgia Tech's offense here. Haynes King can absolutely deal, and they've got enough weapons to outlast this Duke defense. I still think Duke keeps this one close, though, as they are 5-0 for a reason and won't go down too easy. I've got Tech taking this one 27-21. Kansas's losing streak is now extended to 4 games after another loss last week to TCU. Even at home, this team still looked just awful compared to what we expected from them, giving up 500 yards of offense, including 350 through the air to Josh Hoover. Even while forcing 3 turnovers, Kansas still lost by double digits to a team I still don't think is that good. Arizona State has exceeded early expectations so far and got the week off to pause the 2-game skid to prepare for this week's matchup. With how bad Kansas is slumping, and it just keeps getting even worse, I find it hard to not side with Arizona State here. At home under the lights with a chance to get back in the win column, I'm going to take the Sun Devils to continue the Kansas losing streak, 31-24. Next up, we've got Hawaii at San Diego State. Braden Shaker looks back in business for Hawaii's offense, as before the bye week he dropped 400 yards on a solid FCS defense in Northern Iowa. But Hawaii has still looked all over the place throughout the season, with a near upset win over UCLA and then a blowout loss to Sam Houston State. It's hard to gauge what this team really is, but I do believe they have the talent on offense to win some games, including this one, as San Diego State fell to Central Michigan last week on the road despite a decent game from out of freshman quarterback Danny O'Neal. They just really struggle to do anything in the second half and still have a ways to go on both ends. Until we see that happen, I'm going to think Hawaii has a real chance to steal this game. I'm going to take them on the road close, 28-23. Miami finally had their dogfight game last week against Virginia Tech, with one of the craziest endings I've ever seen, but they escaped that one still undefeated and will have to refocus as they hit the road to take on Cal. This could be another dangerous game for them up against a quality defense that's had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. Jade Knott should be healthier and ready to roll, and Fernando Mendoza looks pretty solid right now, but I think last week was just what Miami needed to remind them of how tough some conference games can be, and they battled their way from behind to close that one out. I think they'll be locked in and ready for another fight in this game and continue their undefeated season with a 2-score win on the road, 34-20. Arizona Texas Tech looks like potentially the shootout of the week this week, with both offenses having some great talent and coming off pretty solid weeks. Arizona with just 23 points, but up against a really strong Utah team on the road, and Texas Tech putting up 44 to survive an incredible game with Cincinnati. Both of these defenses have struggled throughout the year, and even last week it was more of Utah being unable to finish drives costing themselves points. I'm expecting a really fun game to watch here, though, and I think Arizona proved enough last week that they still have a chance in the Big 12, which is absolutely up for grabs. Give me the Wildcats to come away with a win in this one, 38-30. That's it for my Week 6 picks. Let me know your thoughts down below, as well as your upset predictions and which games you're most excited to watch this week. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.